Good evening guys, and welcome to yet another spooky adventure. Joining myself again as usual. In the background you will see Adventures of Paul. Tonight brings us back to the Knobby Line where I done a vlog recently, but then it was about talking specifically about the train line, what was adjacent to it. Tonight is about two ghost stories specifically, what combinated in those, both from a different era, both had different outcomes. One is a ghost that frequents an area, one is a ghost that tries to get in an area but it's forbidden to do so, but I'll talk more about that a bit later. We'll get going. It is bitterly cold, so if we're chatting away and our teeth are going etc, or you've got the steam, it's just because we are freezing. Anyway guys, enough said, let's go and do this because we're going to freeze to death otherwise. The Knobby Line by night. Paul says he's seen something big moving there amongst the rocks and the verge. Could possibly be a fox. I know, I can't tell from here. Maybe it'll be about if we get a bit closer. We've got to go that way anyway. As I said before, that'll be the Knobby Line down there, which would have gone from Wolverton to Newport Pagnell. We will catch up with it again back there, but this just adds the spookiness to it by going through the old woods. You know what, I've never noticed this pipe here before. Nothing significant, it just thought, well, just a bit different. But we'll make our way through Black Horse Woods, which is like a thicket area to be honest with you. As you can see, it is pitch black. Nothing better than a bit of torchlight. Now obviously this would not have been like it is now in the time questionable of when these characters would have had their incidents that led to their demise and then becoming ghosts and frequenting the area. This would have been added on probably maybe late 60s, late 70s of the last century. The people in question, one of them died at least 220 years ago and the other one, I believe it was 1873. So yeah, this was all built in this area just specifically because you've got the Black Horse pub further beyond the thicket and the Knobby Line to your right. It's just something that's pretty cool. You can hear generators because we are virtually about 50 metres away from the Grand Union Canal and all the barges that have moored up along there. But this bit here is just pretty quaint, and you do get the spooky vibes of eyes and that in the thicket looking at you, etc. And it just means that we can get on and tell the story, and it just adds that little something to it. This area, of course, actually I can see eyes right in front of me there in the woods. Don't know if you've just seen a couple of little flicks. There is something in there, and I'd say it's probably a fox. Won't cause us any harm, of course. You're just seeing eyes now and again. Because it doesn't help that it's now frosty and you're getting, oh, it's a cat. Is that a cat? Focusing. It's a cat, it's a putty cat. You're getting a twinkle now of the frost that's settling on the ground. So it's bitterly cold. It's probably -1.5, -2 possibly. That equates to about, is it 39 Fahrenheit? Not 100% sure, someone out there will know. But this area here, the Knobby Line, the canal, would all have been built back in the day by your old navvies. Called navvies because of the outfit they would wear. It's very much like a tweed, I believe. I can only assume that, I don't know for sure, it's just what I've read up. I think it was like a tweed, but it was navvy, as in navy in colour, and they were called navvies. A lot of them died producing the railways and the canals that we know today. A lot of them probably around this area. walking around this old pond fountain area. You see a sheet of ice growing over the top of that at the moment. Dare say there'll be some silly bugger that will throw something on it and think, oh, that's stable enough to walk on, and end up to their neck in freezing cold water. Right now we're on the bank side. Top of that bank will level off, and you have the Grand Union Canal the other side of it. There is a picturesque waterfall. Well, I say picturesque, it's a little trickle just the other side of that bridge over there. It's pretty ornate. You can see the frost on the ground. And this is part of 3 pools, and I've said before, it's like an exclamation mark. You got this pool this side, and there's 2 the other side, actually in Linford Manor, which is the area adjacent to where we are. And it's the church there that's within Linford Manor where our second ghost frequents the perimeter area. He can't go in the church or the graveyard area because he's forbidden to do so, and I'll talk more about that after I've spoken about the first ghost, which her story comes up pretty shortly. But in the meantime, here's the backside of water. Pretty cool, if you like that sort of thing, of course. I tell you what guys, this is one heck of a staircase. It's not very long, but the steps are so steep you gotta make a proper stride just to get up them. And from there we'll be back on course on the Knobby Line. And as you can see, we are the only daft sods out tonight. Okay, on with our first story then. So, our first character, our first person who is no longer with us, passed over 1873, I believe it was, around the time this Knobby Line was being finished off before it could actually take trains. Her name was Jane Nichols. At the time she was an 18-year-old young lady. No one knows the reason why, but one night, I think it was April, she stripped off totally naked by the side of the canal. Specifically, there is an iron bridge that we're coming up to. She stripped off there and threw herself into the cold depths of the canal, and her body was recovered the following day. And it's said, it's not local folklore, people have turned around and said they have seen her ghostly figure adorning the bridge, on top of it, beneath it. I don't know, make of it what you will. I'm not here to judge, to turn around and say whether these accounts are true or not. I'm just sort of telling the story to you guys so you can make your own mind up. There is a plethora of people out there who do not believe in ghosts, and there is the same that do. Now, there is also a load of people that will go into a church and pray to someone without the proof, and you can't have one without the other. That's my own terminology. And so this is the old iron bridge that is supposed to be frequented by the ghost of Jane Nichols. I said, really tragic, 18 years old. What would actually possess you in a spring day? Don't know what she was going through, obviously, but to strip off and throw yourself into the murky waters below with the pure intention of killing yourself. And that's exactly what happened. You see the ice forming. That is how cold it is, ice forming on the top of a canal. We said about it being a knobby line. It's nowadays more of a historic trail. Don't really see from that, because I'm not going to shine it with my torch, but there's a sign there that turns around and says what's where, etc. The information on both of the characters can be found on the Great Linford Manor's website when you go through the history, and it's got inquests, etc., people of the area, and that's where I've pretty much gathered the information about these two characters and what actually happened. The next one is kind of bizarre. Not the actual death, that could happen to anyone who fell on times that it's just the way he was treated afterwards. Linford Manor and the ghost of Daniel Haynes. So we're going back to a time of 1804, 220 years ago. There was a happy-go-lucky farmhand by the name of Daniel Haynes, and for some apparent reason he was seen jolly the night before. The following day they found him hanged in his small abode in a little sheltered area away from the manor house. Now, back in those days, I don't know the reason why, maybe it's just an old time thing, inquests were held in the Nag's Head, which is a public house on the high street just off from the manor itself. Now, they come up with this old archaic term which is known as felo de se, which is going back from a bygone era, and it basically means that it's illegal to commit suicide. That's what it was like back in those days. Now, because of this, because of him being denounced felo de se, they refused any right for him to be buried in consecrated ground, i.e. the church around Linford Manor. So they said, pretty much ordered, that he was buried in the high street. I don't know whether to this day his body lays beneath that road or not, but that is what happened. And ever since, his ghost is supposed to frequent the perimeter area of the church and the graveyard, because of course he's forbidden to gain entry. Now, whether that's the reason why he's still supposed to be about, because he's not at rest, God only knows. But it's quite a fascinating story. Again, I found it in the archives of Linford Manor. It has a pretty treacherous history, I believe. It goes back to the time of slavery, and nowadays it's owned by Pete Winkleman, who is the chairman of MK Dons. But we're coming up to the houses, the churchyard, etc. now, so have a look at the area that he's supposed to frequent. Unlikely to see anything, as I said. I'm just here with Paul telling the story. That's all we can do, and you can make your own conclusions from that. As I said, it's this area here, the perimeter wall, that he is supposed to frequent, because he cannot step foot that side there. That is consecrated ground. This is not. It's all to do with Christians, etc., having the right to be buried on consecrated ground. Beautiful church, by the way. And it's got them like castle vibe to it. I believe it's still a church that runs nowadays. Some of them you get that become defunct. The church disowns them, gets rid of them, they're no longer fit for purpose. Which is sad really, because there's a lot of people you find are buried in the cemeteries, and then a church just turns around and says, we're retiring you and leave you in ruins. I said, as before, we do this as respectful and peaceful as possible, because we do not want to disturb anyone here. But that, years ago, if this was fortified, these would be areas here where archers and longbowmen would have sat if it ever come under siege, the likes of maybe a civil war, etc. I just find it fascinating, these small little cubbyhole doors, or I think they're called priest holes. We're kind of in amongst the tombs of that time period now, the 1800s. Yeah, you can tell with the state of them. Paul's just stating that the moon, shame it's not a full moon, picturing out over the top there. Yeah, it's still a place of worship. Yeah. Some of them, as I said before, they do get closed down. Again, some old tombs, old graves. Don't know what the oldest one in here would be. Probably somewhere in the early 1700s, possibly earlier than that. Beautiful stained glass window there. Churches ain't really my thing, to be honest with you guys. It's just the spooky nature of what we do leads us to these places. But some of them pretty ornate. Again, as before, a lot of people misconceive these as being what they call vampire graves. That at one point probably would have had a further grid over the top of it, and it's not to keep those inside, it's to keep those who would ponder out. So the likes of up in Scotland, Burke and Hare, etc., the old grave robbers for the surgeons at the time. It's where all your medical history comes from people grabbing cadavers, taking them off, and basically being chopped up by physicians, and that's where you would get all your science from. Your medical science would come from that. And it's ironic, I'm not sure which one it was, either Burke or Hare. I think he actually ended up on display himself. That is of course the famous Greyfriars. This is not even a mere fraction of the size of that place. And then obviously you've got your great London cemeteries that are truly beautiful. But I do know that people in a quirky way do love graveyards. I'm not at all scared by them or what might be lurking. Very unlikely, of course. Look at that lamp. Gives off like a Narnia cart vibe. Pretty stunning, to be honest with you. I did mention this in the daytime vlog while we was here, that this once was I believe the middle section was a school building, and these were the worker houses for the poor, etc., that would sow the land, the crops, etc., paid for by the rich, and they would stay on site pretty much as a major part of their salary is that they would have an abode to live in. But it's quite cool and quirky. I'm just going to go around the back way and show Paul. It's not at all abandoned, but it's got them vibes as you get to the garden area around here. So again, in the area where Daniel Haynes is supposed to frequent, and it's this bit here. How cool! If you're a urbexer, etc., like ourselves, this is the sort of thing that we'll be coming up against next Tuesday evening. I found one nowhere near in this sort of condition, an old farmhouse. Not going to give the location until we found it and discovered it properly ourselves, and it's so old and battered that it won't matter. You can't do any more damage to it afterwards. Anyway guys, from a freezing cold myself and Adventures of Paul. Oh, just one thing I did want to mention, thank you so much to everybody over the last couple of years has been getting going to subscribe to myself. I don't ask for subscribers, as you know, but I hit that magic sort of benchmark of 1,000 subscribers the other day. It probably fluctuate up and down as we go, but I am truly humbled and honoured to present these things for you. Hope you enjoy them, and with that, next week myself and Paul will be back if we can find it. It's a bit of an urbex abandoned farmhouse, not far from where we live. We know exactly where it is, know exactly how to get there. We're aiming to get there just as it gets dark, so we can actually see it and have a look around. If from there we're not quite happy with what we filmed, we'll go on to an area which is probably about 400 metres from there, when my father said back in the late 90s, early 2000s, he was confronted by the beast of Milton Keynes, which is that mythical cat-like creature. I'm never going to deny what he turned around and said. The way he described it was pretty apt. But we'll leave that for next week, see how we go. Weekend I'm out of course with Rachel. We're probably just going to go to the zoo, just chill out, and then go from there. We've got my birthday coming up. There is loads of places that we can frequent with a week off I've got. We'll be going here, there and everywhere. So from myself and Adventures of Paul, look after yourselves. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the movies. Bye for now.